We want the truth, so watch Truth Wanted live Fridays at 7 p.m. Central. Visit tiny.cc/YTTW and call into the show at 512-991-9242 or connect to the show online at tiny.cc/calltw.
So you think that you can tell us how to live our lives, never questioning the source from which your moral code derives. You think that suffering is part of some great plan that's been devised. I wonder, what will it take for you to start opening your eyes? I wonder.
Oh yeah.
I wonder.
Oh yeah. Hello. Welcome to the Atheist Experience. Today is September 11th. My name is Kenneth, and joining me today is the incomparable. I don't have the vocabulary to describe my admiration for Forrest Vakai.
I thought you were talking about Greg, the guy running the show behind the scene, but thank you so much.
No,
It's
no,
very kind of you.
No, Greg's comparable. I can describe Greg. I mean, yeah, Greg's awesome, but anyway.
Well,
Hey,
thank
look,
you so much, Kenneth. That means the world to me.
Well, thank you. So, friends, joining us, the Atheist Experience is a product of the Atheist Community of Austin, which is a 501c3 organization dedicated to the promotion of positive atheist culture and the separation of religion and government. Two things. I'm a fan of those things.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah, those are good things.
Very
But
much. Very
look,
much.
I don't want to do too much in the way of ado because I'm looking at the calls and I'm just getting more and more excited about this show.
We have some really good ones today. This looks amazing.
All right, let's just dive in, right? Let's do it.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
We've got David. Pronouns are he, him, calling from Pennsylvania, says that he's had a personal experience where he talked to Jesus and the Antichrist. Dave, what happened?
I'm stoked to hear about it, man.
So basically it's kind of a long story. First of all, I just want to say I've been a fan of the show for a long time, and for 12 years actually. And basically what happened was these experiences that I had, it was when I was like psychotic, because like in 2010 I got diagnosed with bipolar. I was manic and psychotic and stuff. So like I started to think that like LeBron James was the Antichrist. And so I started like Googling like 666 type stuff. I came across the Atheist Experience. And then it just kind of went from there. The second time I got really sick, which was in 2014, I wound up in the psych ward for like 9 days. And I talked to a guy and I was just like looking for answers. I was like obsessed with this hockey player that died the same day as me, or died the same day I was born, I meant to say. And I was asking like a bunch of people in the psych ward about it, because I was like, off my meds and kind of like acting crazy. And it seemed like the stuff that he told me had made sense, and it seemed like nobody else was paying attention to him. So yeah, it's just kind of a long story. And then the Antichrist, it was like the guy that Jesus that I talked to in the psych ward, he told me what he thought the name of the Antichrist was. So like I messaged the guy on Facebook, and he kind of started like talking shit to me and stuff like that. And really, I'm just trying to kind of like move past all that.
Okay.
But it was just like such an intense experience, and I keep seeing things pop up that like kind of reinforce my delusional beliefs. And I'm trying to like move past forward.
This is interesting because it sounds to me like you're characterizing these experiences as, I mean, you just use the word delusional. So are you under the impression that these experiences that you've had are not consistent with reality?
They're not consistent with reality because I was psychotic at the time that they happened.
Okay.
And I wasn't at all religious like before, like I got sick. And it really was like, just, I don't know, like when you're manic and stuff, you have like a lot of grandiose type thoughts. And a lot of times that of course comes to like God, because you can't explain what's going on in your mind, especially if you didn't know ahead of time that you were sick. And so you just kind of say, oh, well, it's God, or like, oh, I'm like experiencing something with God, because you don't have like a better way of explaining it. So I think a lot of people that are like delusional have like, you know, or people that are like mentally ill have like delusions about like God and stuff like that.
Well, it probably wouldn't be a great idea to be speaking for other people. If they want to call and talk about their experiences, they're of course more than welcome to. But I guess what I'm wondering at this stage in this call is just, you know, how are you doing now? Are you getting the help and the care that you need, and are you still having these kinds of experiences?
I'm doing fine now. I haven't been sick in like 8 years. And I didn't want to make it seem like I thought that religion was a mental illness. I'm not like, I hear people like Bill Maher say that. I totally disagree with that at all.
I think I get what you were saying. You're saying that this can exacerbate things, right?
Yeah. I mean, it's just like one thing. Like when you're manic and you're kind of paranoid and you're psychotic, you tend to believe in like conspiracies. Like you believe that like, you know, the government's after you, or like, or that God's after you. Cause like right before I got manic the first time, I like prayed to God that like, I kind of bribed God in a way. I prayed to him that like if the Cavs won the championship that I'd become like a Christian. And it felt like when I got sick, like right after LeBron left, that God was kind of making fun of me. It felt like he was flipping me off. It kind of felt like he was telling me basically to like go fuck myself. Because it felt like what the prayer that I said was like so stupid.
Go ahead, Forrest.
I think it's really important that like this whole time you have used like words, like you've talked about how these are manic episodes. You've talked about these delusional things. You've talked about like you are incredibly sober and lucid in the way that you're describing these things. And that's reassuring to me. And it makes me feel like you've got a lot of hope there. And the fact that you're able to identify what these things are. Something you said at the very beginning, though, that I wanted to jump back to, because it sounded like the reason why you called was that you were worried that like you were trying to walk away from this. You're trying to recover from this. Like what's the reason for the call today?
Screener asked me if I was an atheist or a theist. I would probably honestly prefer to be an atheist because I think I'd be able to sleep better. I just keep going back to the episodes, and it just seems like there's always things that, like, reinforce my delusional beliefs. Like, I'm not sick. I mean, I'm on medication, and I haven't been sick in a long time. It's like the one thing I worry about the most is that, like, if I get sick again, because it occurred to me both times I got really sick that maybe I should just commit suicide when I'm sick, because that'd be like the only way I could go to heaven. Because like when I'm not sick, I'm not very religious. I don't pray. I don't go to church. I don't read the Bible or anything like that. So it felt like my best bet of going to heaven would be just to commit suicide while I'm manic.
Yeah.
Because then I'd be like a true.
We definitely don't want that.
Yeah. I would say, I mean, quite frankly, I mean, like I do appreciate, like Forrest said, that you're talking about these things in the terms that you are. It sounds like you're being thoughtful and reflective about these experiences in a way that's frankly sort of uncommon. And that's a good thing. I think that this call might be like a little bit outside the scope of the show. And that if you or anybody listening to this is having any type of thoughts of self-harm, the best thing you could possibly do is talk to somebody who's a mental health professional about that. David, I'm happy to hear that you're doing well currently. You're more than welcome to call the show again. But yeah, in the meantime, I hope you're taking care of yourself. Look, before we get to some more calls, look, if you like what we do and you'd like to support the ACA, here are some of the ways that you can do that. First, you can become a member for as little as 99 cents a month. You can click the little join button below this video, and it'll give you access to things like special chat emojis. So that alone, I think is pretty sweet. You should know the Atheist Experience is just one of several shows put on by the ACA. Make sure to check out our other content as well. You've got Secular Sexuality on Thursdays, starting at 7 o'clock. Truth Wanted airs live Fridays at 7. We have our Sunday shows, Talk Heathen at 1 o'clock. The Nonprofits, some would say the flagship show of the ACA, is on right before this show at 3 p.m. And those are all Central Standard Time. Finally, you can support us on Patreon at tiny.cc/Patreon AXP if you are so inclined. In the meantime, we got some other awesome calls here. I'm too curious about this one. We have someone who is claiming to be a prophet on the line. Prophet Jesus, pronouns are he, him in New York, says, yeah. Right. It says, I believe I can convert you with 3 questions and a statement. The floor is yours.
Hey, thank you so much, Cousin Forrest, Cousin Kenneth. I appreciate you guys taking your time, and I'll try to be as quick as possible. Real quick, I really hope the caller before me really does get the help that he needs. I mean, it's really sad to hear sometimes. I just want to. So my first question is, I've heard a lot of atheists claim that lying isn't immoral. You know, the whole, if you had Anne Frank in the attic argument, would you lie? Yes, I would lie. I just want to ask you a question. Do you believe lying is inherently immoral?
No.
No.
I think that lying can be very useful and very good. I think it can be very immoral, but there are very few things that I would say are inherently immoral.
Yeah.
Lying is just a thing that you do.
All right,
And
that
it
depends,
depends
yeah.
on the situation.
Depends on the situation. Exactly. Yep.
The way you answered that is exactly what I was looking for. Thank you. Do you
Good.
believe
Excellent.
that legislating? Oh, I'm sorry.
I said it's excellent.
Hello? Oh, okay. Do you believe that those who are legislating with the Bible or evangelicals or even their deity in mind are moving us backwards instead of forwards?
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, I guess if they were using their deity or their religion or whatever to do a good thing, like if they were like had a progressive ideal because of their religion, they would technically be moving us forward. But the fact that they're doing it because of their religion is inherently regressive and problematic. So
Yeah.
it's kind of sticky,
Well,
but to your point, yes, I do think so.
Yeah. In that instance, they'd be doing a good thing
Let's not
for
use
kind of
for a bad
good
reason.
The ones that
Yeah.
are sorry. All right, yeah. So not hypothetically, the ones that are currently legislating with their Bibles and their deities in mind, the ones currently, not the hypothetical
Yeah,
ones with progressive ideals.
Well, that's
Yeah.
the thing is that there are some people that are for, like, for example, you know, like helping with wealth redistribution, helping increase access to education, helping to increase, you know, aid to the poor to other countries because of their faith, and they say that this is what, you know, the Christian thing to do. So, like, I've heard very, very leftist ideals be attributed to Christianity before. So I will agree. I'm sorry, I don't mean to get pedantic with you. I just want to be very clear about what I'm saying so that nobody watching this is like, oh yeah, every Christian politician's bad, right? Like, it's just, generally speaking, yes. Generally, the trend is when people are legislating based on religion, it's a bad thing. But I'm not saying that it's impossible for it to not be a good thing. You know what I mean?
There are perfectly good secular reasons to do all of the positive things that we would like to see our legislators advocate for. We don't need to invoke anything religious or believe anything on bad evidence to get good things done.
Yeah. So I'm sorry. I don't mean to get like real long-winded. I know you're kind of going for a set of answers here. I just want to be very clear so nobody can like take a snippet of this show and be like, see, these atheists think that all Christians think this, that, and the other. You have to be conscious of this.
No, I will prefer the longer answers to the shorter ones. We can never do wrong with more information than less. But I'm just going to go into my third question.
Third question, man.
As the battle for separation of church and state seems in danger of being won by those who want to see things such as Bibles in the classroom, what is your counter to that if they do eventually win?
When you say
So
counter,
from-
do you mean from like a practical standpoint? Like what do we do? How do we engage with the system to push back against that, or like an argument that we would use against that being a good idea? Like what do you mean?
So if tomorrow you guys are in Texas, I believe, correct?
Well, the ACA is, but we're both in the United States.
Yeah. I'm in Oklahoma.
All right, well, so let's say Texas or Kansas or Mississippi or a very right-leaning state decides that the Bible should be in every classroom. It should be taught as a class. What do you do after that happens?
I would make the argument that that's fundamentally un-American and that we should push back against that at the ballot box. We should vote to make that type of thing not happen.
I'm also, I would agree with Kenneth. I would do the exact same thing. I would also, you know, I would never stop screaming about how if you're going to do this for one religion, then you would need to do it for all religions. And, you know, the same people I guarantee are not going to want the Quran or the, you know, the Satanist, whatever is taught in the classroom. They're not going to be happy about that. And also, I'm a big fan of malicious compliance as a form of civil disobedience. So if I was asked to teach the Bible, I would teach all the worst parts of the Bible to make sure everybody knew why I think it's a horrible book.
Okay. All right, so now, so I had told the screen I had 3 questions, and then I just wanted a simple conversation, a very short conversation. So if you don't believe lying is inherently immoral, and if you think that lying can be used to progress an agenda that doesn't hurt anyone or that helps people, and if you do believe that the legislation being done with the Bible in mind and trying to get the Bibles in schools are wrong, then I really believe you are my cousins, you are perfect examples of the type of people I want in my congregation.
Why?
Well, yeah, I'm a little confused.
And also, what is your congregation about?
Okay, so I just finished writing the Holy Book of Shite. It is the only testament that we need. Me being the prophet, I wrote this. It was divinely inspired by great scientists.
Before you promote your thing, like, why should we believe in what you're saying? You're saying divinely inspired. I'm assuming then you're a theist and you believe that there's a God. Like, I have to take you back to the original question of what do you believe and why?
All right. So my denomination is a very new denomination, and
seems so.
We believe. I'm sorry.
I said it seems so, considering the fact that you just wrote the book and all that.
Yes, I just wrote it, 2022, and it's I believe the only testament that we need. It starts off with the Big Bang, and it ends with today. There's nothing hokey in it. Back to my first question, if lying isn't inherently moral, then yes, I do have a deity. And yes, my holy book should be a counter in the schools when the Bibles are put into the schools.
All right. So I've lost patience. Hey, Jesus, like, okay, respectfully, I have no idea what the hell you're talking about or where this is going. What you said was, I believe I can convert you with 3 questions and a statement. I'm wondering, convert to what? Because this sounds like you got on here to ask a bunch of inane questions and promote your book. Is that what this is about?
Oh, did you hang up on me?
Nope.
No,
I muted you.
We're asking you.
Yeah,
Did you?
I gotta get this back on the rails
to promote yourself.
Yeah, I gotta get this back on the rails. You said you could convert us. What convert me to what?
Yes. The Church of Shite.
The Church of Shite?
Low key. Yes. And
is this a joke?
Our whole thing is, it's not really a joke. Like I said, if lying is not inherently immoral, then I have a deity. I have a religion, and my book should be given the same level of tolerance that the Bible is given if that Bible wins out in
cool. So you said you have a deity. What, like give us a reason to think that this deity is real. That's kind of more, what this show is about.
The universe is my deity.
So what you've done is you've made a silly joke religion that you can say isn't a joke, so that way when people try to push religion to school, you can say, well, my religion is valid too, and then you have a ridiculous thing that you claim that you have to have force in schools, and what you actually are teaching is just basic science, and that way you're teaching science in school. Is that the whole bit? Because that's been done 1,001 times.
Well, if lying is not inherently immoral, then no, I do have a deity and I do have a religion.
Yeah, you just completely ignored everything that I just said, right?
Yeah, what is lying?
We get the whole premise. We get what you're saying. We're just saying it's a joke that a million other people have done. So like, we get it, but like, I don't get what you just be forward with the point here. What
does lying have to do with your deity being real? I mean, because a minute ago you said your deity is the universe.
Isn't a real deity, but if we lie, quote, to children, and it's not really bad, then we can lie and say that we have this fake religion. That's all he's saying. Lying is a good thing because we're lying about the fact that we have a religion.
Not necessarily lying to the children, but whenever you
to the government if to say that you have a religion that needs to be forced in classrooms.
Standards that you have to have for the government in order to become a tax-exempt religion. And once my
It's the same thing. It's
Okay.
the same thing as the church who said that gay marriage is holy and therefore gay marriage is
we're good
religiously
here.
protected. It's the same thing as the church, the Satanic Temple that says if you're going to have your holy statue, you have to have the statue of Baphomet. It's the same thing as the people who said that abortion is a part of their religion and therefore abortion rights. We get what you're saying. It's been done a bunch. Good luck to you, but it doesn't usually work. So like, congratulations, try do it, whatever.
I feel like there's better ways that all of us could be spending our time than continuing down that track. Really quickly, look, if you shop on Amazon, then you can support the ACA there at no cost to you. You can go to tiny.cc/Amazon Smile ACA and designate the Atheist Community of Austin as your selected charity. And if you do that, Amazon will donate a portion of their profits directly to the ACA. You should also be aware that we have a channel that houses all of the shows of the ACA in audio podcast form. Visit tiny.cc/AEN podcasts. There you can listen to all the latest shows from the Atheist Experience, Talk Heathen, Truth Wanted, Secular Sexuality, the nonprofits, all in one place. How convenient
so many
is that?
things.
It's so many things in one easy to locate URL there. We also have 3 Facebook groups that are run by fans and for fans that you can interact with. We've got the Atheist Experience fan group at tiny.cc/FBAXP. There's also the Atheist Experience private fan group where you can interact with others without having those interactions pop up on your public feed. That is over at tiny.cc/FBAXPPR. And we have a newer group, the Atheist Experience fan group, Atheist versus Theist Debates, where you can, go out there, kick around some arguments, try them out on theists and atheists alike. You can find that at tiny.cc/AXP fan debates. I'm on those, all of them. So let's do stuff. Let's interact. Let's hang. In the meantime, we've got Mark, pronouns are he, him in Canada, who's bringing the scientific evidence for the Exodus. Mark, what's going on?
Hey guys, how you doing?
Yeah, good.
Awesome, Mark. How are you?
Good. Fantastic, thank you. Yeah, so I got. Can I have my minute, or do you guys know is that only a Bill Hunter thing?
I would say just dive in, man. Just dive in.
All right, I'll dive right in. So here we go. So in 1500 BCE, there's the Santorini eruptions, which were some of the biggest eruptions in history that we can track, and they were all along the Mediterranean. It was during the reign of Pharaoh Akhmosa the First. In his stelas, it talks of a people being expelled from Egypt called the Hyksos. It talks of a singular god raining plagues upon Egypt, as well. It has a pictorial of water with a knife cutting it. Now, during his reign, and his name is Akhmosa, which in Hebrew, Akh means brother and Mosa means Moses. So his name actually means brother of Moses. Now, some of the stuff we've seen repeat through history with eruptions. So in Cameroon, they watched their water turn blood red due to the iron that came up from an underground eruption. In turn, from the chemicals in the water, the frogs jumped out of the water. The lice and the flies and the disease of the animals is caused from the dead fish and other animals drinking the water and dying. The boils were actually repeated in that same particular Cameroon incident through the carbon monoxide mix in the air. It caused big boils on the people on the land. Hail and fire, which is described as a plague, has actually been repeated through volcanic ash clouds. The moisture in the air mixes together and it rains down hail that appears to be ice and fire. The locusts, which were known to be in that area of Egypt in huge migrations at the time, they tend to be moved during weather disruptions. The darkness has been repeated through volcanic clouds, and they've actually found the ash clouds in Egypt as some more evidence for the Santorini eruption. The firstborn death, that was repeated. The people in Cameroon, the carbon monoxide came through the water, and as they slept, it killed almost everybody in the village that was on the ground. The the Israelites were told to stand up by God. They were told to be ready to go. So they were all awake, which is why none of them would have been affected by the carbon monoxide. The firstborn Egyptian boys slept on the ground because they were in the and then the rest of them slept on the roof. I'm on the
Mark, yeah, you are done.
Question.
So, Mark, you might like this, Forrest, because because the call screen said the scientific evidence for Exodus. So, Mark, I just want to ask you one really simple question. when you hear the words scientific evidence, what do you think something has to be for it to qualify as scientific evidence?
So in the Bible, in order to get proof for God, right? So this is a fallacy. We expect some sort of divine proof. The only way to really prove a divine God is...
Mark, no. I'm just going to mute you again. So I'm going to try this again. I asked you, what is scientific evidence? When you use those words, what do you think that means?
Scientific evidence, in my opinion, would be things that we can test and observe, right, through history. So the eruptions causing these things is a form of scientific evidence that these things are caused by this cause. And then dating the Santorini eruptions to 1500 BC is a way that we can line up scientifically with the story tells, with what we've actually seen repeat in history through the science of observation through volcanic eruptions under mass water, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so I'm wondering real quick, just like, so if we've got a story about some stuff happening and then some stuff that happens elsewhere that kind of looks like the stuff described in the story, how do we figure out if one is the scientific evidence for the other? I wish there was a scientist here. Wait a minute.
Hi. So I actually have a totally different question it's kind of similar, but like my whole thing is like, number one, I want to be very clear, Mark. I don't believe what you're saying because most of the things you said didn't make a lot of sense scientifically, like carbon monoxide moving through water and then asphyxiating people. Don't really have a reason to believe that that's possible or a thing. But like, even if that was true, this is the biggest thing that like I have the whole time you were talking. The biggest question I have is, even if I believed you, even if every single one of those things did happen or was shown to be possible, so what? That doesn't do anything to back up the story, because if I can prove that one dude over here can fly, that does not prove that Superman is real. There's a different claim, different story, entirely different thing. Also, like, it doesn't back up any of the divinity claims in that story. Even if you could prove all those things happened in Egypt and all of a sudden Egypt had a shitty week and all of these insane things actually did really happen and there was a scientific evidence behind it, that doesn't prove a god. That doesn't prove Moses. That doesn't prove any of those things. So like, every single claim needs to be tested and have evidence for it. And saying that these things are possible isn't evidence. And saying that there's some other civilization that had some things happen, which again, can't stress this enough, I do not believe to be the case. Like, that doesn't do anything to back up the Exodus of the Bible, which is what you said you were calling about. So I guess my biggest question is, who cares?
So the carbon dioxide did kill the people. Look it up in Cameroon. It absolutely climbed across the water and killed the entire
world. Carbon dioxide can kill people, and carbon dioxide is soluble in water, but like in the concentrations you're talking about, and also you said carbon monoxide a minute ago, which raises even further questions. So like, there's a lot of variables in what you're saying that don't add up. Yes, those things are technically possible in the same way that it's technically possible that I grow a third arm, but there's a lot of shit that has to happen in a lot of very specific ways for that to occur. And just because it's possible doesn't mean that it's reasonable or that it happened or that there's a god or any of that.
The best way to keep this on the rails here, Mark, is let's deal. Mark, hang on. Let's deal with one specific claim. So if, like, pick your favorite from all the stuff that you just mentioned, and we'll look at it and see if it's evidence for anything.
Sure.
Okay, can I just address really quickly what Forrest said? Because in order to prove a God, a divine spiritual being, right, we need to verify the claims of the Bible, and that's what this is all about, right? If we can verify the claims of the Bible,
no, we don't.
Then we know that it's plausible what God said. So to say who cares, it's not fair. Do you want proof or do you not want proof, right? The show says zero proof.
You could verify. Yeah, excuse me. You could verify every single historical claim in the Bible. It would do zero for proving that there is a God. That is a totally different claim.
It does. It backs up the claims of the Bible.
So okay, let's try this.
Because lots of things have happened in New York. That doesn't mean that Spider-Man comics are real because they also happen in New York, right?
I think the best way we could approach this is to like put a claim on the table, and we'll see if it's evidence. And we'll try this out right now. Let's do one.
Sure. Let's go into it.
So, Okay, so there were millions of tons of rocks that fell at the bottom of the Mediterranean Sea that they found, which they theorized, because they've seen, caused a tsunami, which would have forced the waters to recede and come back violently, which is exactly what the Bible says. They crossed the water as it receded. It came back violently and killed the Egyptians. This is
My first question is,
right?
who's they?
So that right there.
Who's they? You just said they found and they theorized. Who's they?
The scientists. Why do you guys always go to that, right? They's fine when you guys want to use scientists, but when other
scientists?
people quote scientists or use the consensus, then it's always who's they. My question is, who's they on you, right? They is the scientists that study the Mediterranean Sea and the Santori eruptions from 1500 BCE. That's they, right?
Mark.
Okay, so you said there's a bunch of rocks that fell into the sea. Where do the rocks come from?
From the side of the seawall. It collapsed, right?
So rocks fell into the water. Rocks fell into the water, right?
Into the water, yes. Millions of tons of rock.
How did that make water recede?
Wave that receded the waters. Huh? Sorry?
Right. How would that make water recede? Because when there's a tsunami, as a result of an earthquake, water is displaced one way, and then it shock waves back the other way. When you displace water by adding things to it, it wouldn't make any sense that it recedes for two reasons. Number one, because force is going in the other direction. And number two, because you just added volume that water cannot penetrate. You literally removed the space for the water to recede into. So saying that adding rocks to water makes the water go backwards makes zero sense.
So have you never jumped in a pool? Take a bowl of water and drop a rock in it for us. That's exactly what it does. It all spreads away from it, which is exactly what tsunamis.
And then what?
From the
then
rocks,
what happened?
unless the rocks fell into the Red Sea, there's no way that it would have displaced water away from the Red Sea. Yes, it displaces water in all directions away from the mass that you just put into it. It wouldn't pull it away from a water source hundreds of miles that way. Unless the rocks fell into the Red Sea where the Israelites were supposedly walking, then there's no way the water would have moved away from there because of rocks being added. That doesn't make any sense.
So how do tsunamis happen, Forrest? How do these violent...
I just explained that.
If not displacement of... Well, that's exactly it. So I'm not saying that as the rocks fell, the water opened and they crossed. I'm saying it caused a tidal wave, which went back and forth like tsunamis do. It receded the water long enough for them to cross and then came back as soon as the Egyptians were crossing. This is the story, and this is what we know in science.
If it went back and forth like that, then there would have had to have been... If it went back and forth like that, then the water would have had to have increased and gone up and encroached on the landscape at least as much as it receded, because, we always have conservation of energy. We can't have the perfect, back and forth. So the water would have had to have swollen up a huge amount and then receded away and then somehow stayed away long enough for all these people. What were there? Hundreds of thousands of Israel slaves all passing through there. And then it rushed in. That's several different ridiculous things all happening back to back.
That's the divine. That's the point. Is we can see that something like that happened through the millions tons of displaced rock. We know a tsunami would have been caused, and the Israelites said that it gave them time to walk through. Right? I don't really care if you believe it or not. You can't deny the science there, right? That's the point. That's the point of this show. You want evidence.
There isn't science there to deny. There's no. Tsunamis don't behave that way. Look, I'm not a geologist or a meteorologist, so I'm here about it.
Isn't that how you know when a tsunami?
Mark, I'm just going to ask you one. Mark, I'm muting you because there's a bigger question that I have to ask you. What does Exodus 14 say happened?
Sorry, the beep cut me out. What was that?
What does Exodus 14 say happened?
Exodus 14? You want me to get my Bible and read it, or do you have it in front of you?
Well, you're saying that this is how you explain, you're saying you're giving the scientific evidence in support of the Exodus narrative, and you're talking about the crossing over the Red Sea, and you're saying that rocks fell and there was a tsunami. I'm asking you what the story says happened.
So the story said that the waters receded. Moses held his staff up and receded the waters, right? And they crossed over, which they also find a land bridge in the Red Sea. So they may have crossed there. So they didn't.
Mark,
The waters
slow down.
didn't even have
Mark,
to recede fully.
Mark. All I was asking you was, what does
Right?
it say?
Okay.
What does it say?
It says that Moses raised his staff and calmed the waters, right? He receded the waters.
So what it says
No,
is
it says that there was a strong wind,
a
doesn't it?
strong wind is what the story says.
Also, I'm
Is-
looking at it right now. It says that they walked on
So
dry
on dry
ground
land,
with a
right.
wall of water
So-
with
and
their
this
left
is-
and their
this
right.
is
So there
where- this
were
is-
the walls.
This is where the whole thing that you're doing, this whole project that you're engaged in, is like weird to me as a person who was a Christian for more than 20 years. Because the whole story is the Israelites, they get up to the Red Sea, they're freaking out. The armies of Pharaoh were closing in, and God's like, what's up? Why are you guys panicking? Moses, stretch your rod out, and I'm going to divide the ocean. You guys are going to cross on dry land. And it says that a strong wind comes. Why are you not defending that? Why aren't you talking about meteorology? Why are you talking about rocks at the bottom of the Red Sea?
It also says that there were walls of
Can you hear
water
me?
to their left and right side. So like that doesn't sound like a tsunami.
Great tsunamis would cause great winds, right? So the fact that they didn't know that millions of tons of rocks were
Tsunamis don't
causing
cause wind.
Stop. No, Forrest, go for it. You're nailing it right now.
Tsunamis, so that you're talking about like 15 different things and trying to conflate them all together. That's
Yes.
not how tsunamis behave. That's not how wind behaves. Also, that's not what the story says. The story says that they walked on dry ground with I pulled it up right here, with water on both sides of them, walls of water around them. And then the second they got to the other side, that Moses put his hand out or his staff out, and it brought the waters back at that exact moment. The story here says that the water behaved in this way and then in that way, and that's all that happened. It doesn't talk about like a tsunami or anything like that. And also, tsunamis don't act the way you're saying. Like, none of this makes any sense that you're saying. And again, I cannot stress this enough. Even if that made sense, it wouldn't verify the story. It would just say that things like this are possible. Finding rocks in the bottom of the water that could have potentially caused tsunami doesn't mean that these things happen. We would need a lot more evidence. For example, it says that it swallowed up all the people of Egypt, including the Pharaoh. We should find remnants of that there. And even if we couldn't find remnants of that, we should find records of that. You know, in Egypt, in Egyptian culture at this time, the Pharaoh was basically a god. They would have written that shit down. If the god died today, they would have noticed that. Also, they kept tax records and records of like how much grain was harvested in a season. Why didn't they write down the one time when hundreds of thousands of slaves escaped? Like, there has to be multiple lines of evidence for something to be scientific. You can't just say, here's this one thing that kind of looks like this, therefore it's real.
Yeah, Mark, I'm just wondering, like, and I want you to address this because the story talks about wind. You're talking about rocks. Did the Bible get it wrong?
No. So, like I said, there's a land bridge across the water. So the fact that there was water on both sides doesn't disprove anything. Second, great tsunamis that size.
Okay, I'm stopping you again because the Bible doesn't say jack shit about a land bridge. The Bible says that a strong wind divided the sea. It doesn't say shit about a land bridge. So what are we talking about?
See, but you guys are saying there's water on both sides. How could that be? I'm explaining that they found a land bridge across.
We are not saying that.
That's
We're
not
saying that.
walls
The
of
Bible
water.
says that. The Bible says
Having
that
a land bridge above the water does not mean walls of water on each side of you, right?
Yeah, the Bible says that God caused this strong wind to divide the sea and that the Israelites cross on dry land. Okay, doesn't say anything about a land bridge, doesn't say anything about rocks falling in. I'm wondering, like, if you're going to talk about the scientific evidence for the Exodus, why have we been talking about rocks for the last 10 minutes?
Well, do tsunamis create great walls of water? They don't do that?
Tsunamis aren't caused by wind.
Water and
Tsunamis are not caused by great magical winds that come from a god.
They cause wind, right? Waves that big
No.
are going to cause some
Tsunamis do not cause winds.
Tsunamis don't cause wind.
And Pharaoh Akmosa, you're referring to the Pharaoh. Why didn't you write it down? If you look at the stelas they found of Pharaoh Akmosa, it has a pictorial of water with a.
Buddy, listen, Mark, I'm not doing this.
come
I'm going
on.
to ask you exactly one more time. The Bible talks about great winds blowing. I want to know, why have we been talking about rocks for the last 15 minutes?
I just told you 30 times. The rocks were the cause. The wind was a byproduct, and the land bridge was the reason they seen water on both
Okay.
sides.
So
I mean,
again,
I
I'm asking you,
perfectly.
Exodus
You
doesn't say
you don't want an answer.
Exodus. All right. Exodus doesn't say anything about rocks. Exodus says winds caused by God were the cause for the sea being divided. So did the Bible get it wrong?
Because they didn't see the wrong. How would they know?
Oh,
They don't
winds.
know what the science.
How
of
would
the
they know?
science.
Right.
You know what? I agree. How would they know? I'm done with you, Mark. This is wild for you to call in and say you're going to provide the scientific evidence in support of the Exodus narrative, but then when I talk about what the Exodus narrative actually is, you're like, well, how would they know what the fuck was going on?
Right.
was
Tsunamis
the
also like, again, I'm a biologist. I'm not a meteorologist. So if I'm wrong, somebody call me out. But like last I checked, wind is caused by differential heating of air due to exposure to the sun and the rotation of the earth by a smaller effect. Not like tsunamis don't fucking cause wind. Like that doesn't make any sense. And also tsunamis don't stand still. So like, yeah, there might have been a wall of water from a tsunami. It isn't going to hang out there. And there wouldn't be one on each side. It said that there was one on both sides of them. 2 tsunamis that both parked right here. What is that?
I mean, if you're going to argue that there was some supernatural wind holding back 2 tsunamis, that'd be a whole different set of claims. It also wouldn't say anything about what's said in Exodus. In Exodus, there's a sea. Israelites freaking out. Moses stretches out the staff. God causes the wind to blow to divide it. That is the claim. So if you're going to bring scientific evidence to support the Exodus narrative, that is what you have to deal with, my friend, not rocks at the bottom of a body of water. Anyway, look, as mentioned before, the ACA hosts several shows other than this one, including Nonprofits, Secular Sexuality, Truth Wanted, and Talk Heathen. If you did not catch all of these shows last week, here's a taste of the things you probably want to go back and watch.
We are reckoning with really powerful forces. You know, I'd like to think that we can experiment and play around with our gender in a casual way, but I also want to say that these things are really fundamental to who we are as a person.
Unbroken love or something, which is not what Hitler meant by it. So if you could help me with that, that would be great.
Oh boy, this is the episode where I get to talk about Hitler. Wow.
My grandfather used to refer to clergymen in a certain way, and he's right in this case. He always used to say, here comes the gravy train of an easy life. And without a shadow of a doubt, this is Jesus pimping.
Do you get these kind of situations where you have like a female frog with like 6 or 7 males like stacked up? Well, I think it'd be hilarious being a female frog jumping around with like this 7th male frog orgy tower going on behind you.
If you're going to make assertions that your God is the only living God, when I ask you why you believe that your God is a living God, you don't get to say, how do you expect me to do that? You were supposed to show up with your A game. It's not my fault that you aren't ready to defend what you believe.
Header back goes there, some nice instruction to give yourself a big old orgasm, or better yet, give someone else one. And so when this arrived, of course, my partner needed to verify the efficacy of this pillow, for science. And so I would just like to say from the bottom of my heart, this may be the only time I can actually say this and it be accurate, but Mr. Greg James, executive producer of the Atheist Community of Austin, thank you for the job.
Oh yeah. I can't help it. I gotta do this. I gotta talk to the slavery guy, William in Florida. You want to talk about slavery? What's up?
Hey, what up? Sorry, I'm on speaker here.
You're just fine.
Just through going through all the verses about servants and masters, and just not really seeing how it's evil, and mainly it's just work, like having employees and just making sure that people are working. I see it as
have you looked at Leviticus 25 by any chance? Have you looked at Leviticus 25?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I don't know where you work,
yeah, I
but
mean,
in Leviticus 25, it says to get your male and female slaves from the nations and the tribes around you. You can buy them. You can give them to your kids as inherited property and have them as your slaves for life. But you can't do that to Israelites.
Okay.
Is the stipulation there in Leviticus 25? Does that sound like your workplace?
I mean, it doesn't, but that doesn't mean that one is right and one is wrong. I mean, like, just because that's not how a specific system is in America doesn't mean that the system in this.
So I just
was it Leviticus 25 is wrong.
Mm-hmm. So I just pulled up a more concise one. I think that more directly approaches this in the book of Exodus, chapter 21, verse 20 and 21. Anyone who beats their male or female slave with a rod must be punished if the slave dies as a direct result, but they are not to be punished if the slave recovers after a day or two, since the slave is their property. So in what context, in what way is owning a human being as property and beating them with the rod not evil?
Because it's the reason I see that somebody would be property is because you need, like, your work and how you work in this world is pretty much how you're defined. And
maybe in your worldview, but certainly not in mine.
All right. Well, I definitely see that. You're going to be.
Let me ask you a question.
Judged by
Let me ask you a very direct question. I'm gonna just to prove a point. Let me just ask you a very direct question, okay? I'm actually gonna ask Kenneth the same question first. Ready? Watch this, Kenneth. Is there any reason at all where it is acceptable to own a human being as property?
No, dude. No.
William, is there any reason at all where it is acceptable to own a human being as property?
Yeah, I think that it's smart. I mean, here's the truth, though.
It's smart.
Then we are
William,
never going to see eye to eye.
William,
that's not no.
All right,
let's take one.
Let me just explain
really quick
for a second, guy.
Well, before we keep going, there's one thing we gotta nail down, okay? And then by all means you can make your point. But at the beginning of this, you were saying you don't see why slavery would be evil. So I guess maybe I'm wondering, when you say something is wrong or evil, like what does that mean to you?
Well, the definition of evil means to break into pieces or cause suffering, pain. That's the Hebrew definition.
I don't give a shit what the Hebrew definition is. I asked you when you use when you say something's wrong. When you say something's wrong, what does that mean to you? Is what I asked you. What makes something wrong?
It means that the intention of the system is to cause damage, destruction to whoever is in the system.
Do you think?
Okay, so do you think that? I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Do you think that a system where you can own people as property and beat them does harm to them?
I think that most of the time, servants become servants because they are in need. And that's really what...
That was a yes or no question, William.
I asked you... We'll try it one more time. So do you think that a system that allows for some people to be owned as property, to be bought and sold, and to be beaten, physically beaten, that does harm to them?
I think that being beaten oftentimes is for the good. I mean, think about people who beat their children, or
let's talk about that.
It's for good. A lot of times being so
good
at someone.
All right, so how can I beat you for your own good, William?
Let's think about this with kids. Like,
to tell you that you're wrong about something.
Do you think that beating
and you can't
kids
use words like a grown-up?
Do you?
There's massive amounts of scientific. I'm sorry, Kenneth. I beg your pardon. I'm probably saying the same thing you are. Massive amounts of scientific evidence shows that hitting children, that spanking, actually does way more harm than it could ever do good. And just to get back to what we said a second ago, if you don't believe science, I don't fucking care what you believe. If I ask
Bro,
you,
you can't
is it
just
okay
defend
to
a belief
own another person? And your answer is anything else but no. You are the problem here. You have to understand that. Like, there is no circumstance, no situation where taking away someone's humanity, we're boiling their right to live down to their work ethic, as you did a second ago, we're hitting someone against their will is a good, morally positive thing for that person or anybody else. This is not an acceptable system. And if you don't see that slavery is wrong because the Bible says it's good, I don't know how to talk to you. That's fucking evil, dude.
Well, let me explain like how servants are seen. Servants are seen as equal.
Slaves. We are not talking about servants. Servants get paid.
Why?
Servants don't get beaten. We are talking about slaves.
All right.
Yeah, like-
well, the person who is, there's a master, and then there's somebody, just like today, there's somebody. There's always a chain of command.
No, it's not just like today, William. Like, I've got to draw attention to this, because this is why I asked you if your workplace is like this. Because at the beginning of this, you tried to act like this is just normal. This is, it's just work, but it's not. Being able to be bought and sold as property and beaten if you step out of line, that's not that's not what we do. We used to have a system like that in the United States, and we got rid of it because it was like obviously like a nightmare for everyone involved. So I'm asking you.
I don't agree with that.
You don't agree with which part?
Servants, and there's slaves today in different countries.
Yes, there are.
But that's not what I said. That's not what I said, William. I said that in this country we used to have legal slavery.
You said today.
I said in this country we used to have legal slavery, and we did away with that because it was a moral and ethical nightmare. So I'm wondering, and dude, I tried to help you out. I'm trying to do you a favor by backing off to just the question of like what makes something moral, what makes something good or bad. And like I'm trying to give you that so that you can take that next logical step of being like, okay, well, if harming people is wrong, which is what you said, and I would tend to agree, just unnecessarily harming people, totally wrong. It's a very short step to go, oh, well, then slavery is obviously wrong.
No, because the intention in the long run is not evil. Just because somebody might get hurt doesn't make the entire intention of it get hurt.
Let's try that. I'm just going to baby steps you through this if I can. So a moment ago we talked about that the system's causing harm to people, that would be wrong. Okay, if the intention of the system is all positive sunshine and rainbows, which it isn't here, obviously, but even if it was, let's say some hypothetical other system that there's just super good intention, but the effect is that it causes harm to people, would forcing people to live under that system be wrong?
No, it's to create hard workers. It's to create a man of work. It's like your work. I mean, like the Bible talks about like how men are justified and men are supposed to be mighty men of labor and mighty men of work. And so like
I got to ask you.
This is how we grow men into.
I got to ask you. I got to ask you a couple questions.
Goal
Mark,
of being a servant is to be a real man. It's to grow men.
William,
a real man.
I know. I that stood out to me too, Forrest. William.
Yeah.
I want to try to back this up. Maybe a step further.
Freak, not a loser.
Maybe a step back further. I just want to ask you, like, because it sounds like you're looking at the Bible as this authoritative source that you can draw some sort of guidance from. Maybe we can start there. Why should anybody care what the Bible has to say about anything?
Why should it? I think the word testifies of itself. I mean, throughout time, people have been the Bible has been the foundation of Israel, like the law of Moses, the Psalms, and the prophets. And it was supposed to be that through people obeying the words and the commandments and the law and understanding the will of God through His words, that they would be able to share that wisdom with other countries, other nations, every nation in the entire world. What?
Every nation in the entire world, what?
came to Israel to hear of the wisdom and to learn, and the Bible even talks about
that's not true at
the
all.
other nations
So
were
let's we gotta
Yes,
step
it
back.
is true,
further.
guy.
So no, it's not. So
Read 2 Kings chapter 10. Yes, it is.
If a book,
How do you say that's
can
not
be-
true? Who are you to say that?
If a book can be used to set up a nation, or a group of people can organize themselves around a book and find some wisdom in it, but in their estimation, does that have anything to do with whether the rest of us should take that book seriously?
People make it up, make their minds for themselves. People see it, and then they.
That's not what I
asked
asked you. I am fully aware that people. I'm fully aware that people make up their minds for themselves about what to take seriously. The question is what we should take seriously. So, for example, there are nations around the world that are sort of theocratic regimes organized around the Quran. There are communities organized around other holy books like the Book of Mormon or L. Ron Hubbard's Dianetics. My question to you is, what does that have to do with whether any of us should take the claims in a book seriously? You're looking at the Bible as if it's this special thing.
Mm-hmm. I mean, throughout history, it's through, like right now, if I read the Quran, I would say that's a piece of junk. Why? Because I see it and I know that God doesn't live through it. So
how do you know that?
It's really about
how are you? How the question
it.
is how? How are you making the assessment that the one book is like the magic perfect God book and the other book isn't?
That's just from my experience and seeing it, and then also the goal of it is that where the truth is where people would be set apart. That was the whole goal.
What does it mean for something to be true, William? William, what does it mean for something to be true?
Everlasting life, the truth, Holy Spirit,
No.
Spirit of truth. The Bible says
you're bringing your sort of stock church answers to this. I'm asking you like an honest and straightforward question.
Guy.
So I'm asking you, what does it mean? What does it mean? What does it mean for anything, for something to be true?
Everlasting. I mean, the Bible. I mean, grace. And you're asking me what I believe truth is.
Let me try this again. If I say the Kansas City Chiefs are a football team, that is a claim that is either true or not. How do we assess whether it's true?
I don't. That's such a stupid, unnecessary thing to talk about truth.
It'd be super easy for you to answer. So, how do we assess whether a claim is true?
I don't know. Define football. I mean, it gets pretty deep, guys. It's like,
hey, there you go.
Green. But what about
you're getting somewhere.
What about a colorblind guy?
You're getting somewhere.
Colorblind.
So
what's green to him?
Listen, William, I know that you are scared to death to have an honest conversation about this, but we're going to try it. So if I say that the Kansas City Chiefs are a football team, we can assess whether that claim is consistent with reality. We can look at what does it mean for what is football? What's a football team? Are the Kansas City Chiefs that? And we look to see if the claim itself is consistent with reality. So I would argue that for something to be true, it needs to be consistent with reality. Do you have a problem with that definition?
I mean, truth is reality. I mean, definitely.
That's not what I said. I said that for something to be true, it needs to be consistent with reality.
Yes.
Awesome. So
that,
if the Bible makes claims,
I want.
If the Bible makes claims, how do we figure out if those claims are true?
Well, biblically, it's if God lives through it.
Well, no, a minute ago, we talked about how truth is whatever's consistent with reality. So if the Bible makes a claim, how do we figure out if that claim is true?
The Spirit bears witness with our spirit that we are the sons of God. Like I believe it's the truth because there's a promise according to the Bible in the name of God, and that spirit of everlasting life is the promise through whoever trusts in the promise. And in this case, it's the New Testament through Jesus Christ. believing that he
those are
died.
some
for
real
sins
pretty
and rose again
platitudes.
for
You
you.
can start a
Everything that,
church.
yeah, that's all gibberish what you just said. So let's do
Why
something
is it
specific.
gibberish though? Here's
Well,
the truth.
because
It's
because
nonsense,
it's
feel-good
nonsense.
words
It
coming out
doesn't
of
make
the mouth
any.
of a
Yeah,
fascist.
you're
no,
talking about
you're
saying it's
feelings,
nonsense. And you're using those feelings to justify things like
No, I'm not.
slavery. Yeah, well, you actually
I'm
are.
saying
So
that God
let's
is
look at a
real.
claim.
He can live, and people can say.
Yeah. So
yeah, God's real and he can live and people can own other people as property and rape
Yeah.
them if they want because it makes him a real man.
yeah. So
Fuck off.
William,
Okay.
if
Okay,
like
guys.
let's think about this.
Rape
Let's
is
think about
punished by the death penalty in the Old Testament.
let's think about the
Yeah,
single.
unless it's a slave, because the Bible says it's okay when it's your slave. Remember that part? Also remember the part where it says that if you rape a virgin, you can buy her. It says that too.
So
yeah, and that's a false
William.
Bible version, by the way.
Okay, so
Oh,
William,
I'm glad you know which one's real, which one's false. Because just a minute ago, when we were reading the same fucking version, you said that that was all acceptable.
so William, it sounds
Because
like
that's
you're using
hypocritical, and
William.
the true God would not be hypocritical.
William. It sounds like what
Oh,
you're
he
doing
knows who the true God is too. My goodness.
William, you're just using your feelings to make assessments. So what I'm wondering is, like, if we think about like the central claim in the Bible, the most important claim in the Bible is that Jesus rose from the dead. I want to ask you this: how would we evaluate whether or not that's true?
Because the promise is that if you trust in him and that he died for your sins and rose again for you, then the promise is that the Spirit of God would live through that promise forever.
Right. That's the
That
claim.
doesn't tell
that
us
is
anything.
that is the claim. I'm asking you, how do we figure out whether or not any of that stuff's true?
It's on you. It's in you. So, like,
No,
here, I mean,
I'm asking you,
if
how do
you-
we figure? Our feelings aren't going to cut it, because I could have like a feeling
Why?
and go, why aren't our feelings going to cut it?
why isn't our knowledge going to cut it? Why isn't our experience, our actual testimony in our own soul and eternal, like our soul, like why is that not good enough for you?
My grandpa told me that the moon is made of cheese, and I feel like it's right in my heart, and I have personal experiences that validate it because it gives me meaning to my life. Is the moon made of cheese, Will?
I just think that's extremely unimportant, and nobody would ever have
yes or no question.
The hand waving there is a way of avoiding engaging honestly with what Forrest is asking you. Let's try this. Are you aware that people have?
Like, if the moon is made of cheese, there's a way for me to find out. Like,
William,
I don't.
And
William.
if Jesus came back from the dead, there's a way for us to find out.
Yeah.
So what are you talking about personal testimony and promises and everlasting life and all this stuff when we're asking you, how can we know if something is true or not?
Yeah. So and when the answer to that question revolves around our feelings, and you talked about personal testimony, I just want to ask you, are you aware that people have very strong feelings and personal testimonies and life-changing experiences in other religions than yours?
I mean, just because they have experiences doesn't mean it's the same experience from the Bible.
Yes, but if someone has an experience and they say that experience is a supernatural one, does that make it so?
I mean, they definitely had an experience, but I'm saying there's one specific experience that the Bible is, and it's set apart from all other religions because all other religions are set apart.
The experiences that you're having, okay, as a Bible-believing person, are going to be distinct from the experiences that someone who believes in some other God will have. But they have experiences too. And you have experiences. And people all over the world have different faiths and powerful, transformative, emotional experiences with their faiths. How do we figure out what's real and what's true here?
Through reasoning and just understanding why all of them are they're what?
No, if they're reasoning, this is amazing. So let's go back to that whole Jesus rose from the dead thing. How do we figure out if that is like a true thing that actually happened?
Because you have the testimony in yourself.
I don't have the testimony myself. I don't think it happened.
That doesn't sound like reasoning.
Yeah, that's just feelings again. How do we figure out if it happened?
I don't know. It's not really just feelings. It's just knowledge.
Well, knowledge. I think of knowledge as being I think of knowledge as being a justified true belief. There has to be some evidence. That belief has to be consistent with reality. I can't just say I feel it and claim to know it. So Like, again, how do we figure out if the feelings that you're having about the resurrection are consistent with reality?
Here's the reality of the reason why I believe on the resurrection is because my knowledge is that I have sinned and come short of the glory of God.
Well, that's Romans says you have, but why should we think that?
I would need forgiveness. What?
Well, yeah, I understand that Romans says that that everyone has sinned and fallen short of the glory of God. The question on the table is, why should anybody care what the Bible has to say about any of this stuff?
Because people are hungry for God. You know,
what does that have to do with whether the Bible is true? People, there's claims about God in a bunch of other religious books too. I'm asking you, what makes the religious book that you're using to justify shit like slavery, dude? What, like why should anybody take this book seriously? I know the book justifies slavery. I'm asking, why should anybody take it seriously?
It just depends on people's experience and seeing how things work. Like, say, like if like how the Bible says, like how and people would see the law and they would say, "Wow, what a righteous God! What amazing!
What a righteous God that justifies slavery." We're gonna drop out, William. Look, man.
No. Before we do, really quick, I just want to ask. Hey, something you said a minute ago is still. Fuck.
My bad.
I just wanted to know what he thought about slavery in the United States, because the shit that he was saying about how slavery is good because it makes you a stronger person. I wonder if he thinks that was a justifiable thing then in America. Fuck off, fascist. Go home.
Yeah, I'm not gonna lie. I try to get away from the slavery stuff because it just makes me feel so fucking gross when people.
Yeah, no, I was done with that shit. I'm sorry. I was happy that you were able to go with the rest of the call because there's no way I was going to waste any more of my time and my breath on that trash.
Well, and
fuck that.
People do this, and like you're sort of sacrificing your humanity and your capacity for compassion for your fellow human being on the altar of faith here. And the question is, like, why would you do that? I know that your book justifies slavery. I know.
Yep.
But
that makes it a bad book.
That's where I was trying to get him to go.
It's not that fucking hard to make that connection. That's what gets me is I really wanted to get that clip in there because I was talking earlier about if somebody takes a single clip from the show, I want that to be the one. If you ask any reasonable person, is there ever a time when it's okay to own a person's property, and their answer is anything other than absolutely no, why the fuck would you ask me something like that? That person is an immoral piece of shit, and they need to reevaluate their life. That's insane. Yeah. So happy that you came on this fucking show in front of thousands of people and showed your ass to everybody. Thank you so much for showing everybody the brain rot that comes along with this kind of thinking. It's really good that people see just how far you can fall and just how far the termites can spread and just how much you can fuck up your mind by believing in this horrible shit. Thank you for being a demonstration for the rest of the class.
Yeah. Well, yeah,
absolutely.
In that sense, good call, William. Thanks. We got Victor in Texas.
Damn.
Victor is wondering what is the
Victor, I fucking dare you.
Yeah, Victor wants to know what is the naturalistic foundation for empathy and reason. Victor, take it away. We'll put the minute up on the screen if you would, crew.
Hi, thanks for having me on. Yeah, I've called in a few times. This is the first time I've talked to you guys, and I know about Forrest's expertise in like evolutionary biology. So that's the main that's my main hold in theism has basically been, that I believe about the sense of morality, which actually ties in very well with the previous caller you just had, with the because I agree with you. I know Forrest, I know you personally have said like me, you read the Bible and you say, this is definitely not a good book. This is a bad book, right? And I lie about the law, but I don't claim to accept. I'm definitely non-biblical in my theism to the extent that I'm theist at all. But I'm still have a hang up on, why so many things that I personally believe are moral. And oddly enough, it seems to me that it's the theists who actually seem to be the most relativistic in moral concepts.
You mean with like justifying slavery and shit like that?
Yeah. Well, yeah, but
Yeah.
like also like justifying making things worse for poor people in other countries for middle class people in America. Like the anti-immigration
don't get
stuff.
me started.
And
yeah. Yeah. There's the question of who would Jesus?
We don't need to worry about endangered species and preserving the environment. So
right. Well, real quick, because I really am interested in what Forrest has to say about this. But when you say you use the word moral a few times, and I think of morality as just the ongoing discussion about what we ought to do and ought not to do. Is that a good starting point for you, Victor? Are we talking about the same thing?
I suppose, and it's just I have this sense that there are certain things that are moral and right, and I wonder about people who sometimes disagree. And I'm thoroughly convinced that we all have our sense of what's moral and right with largely through empathy, which is always in conflict with our own personal appetites and personal concerns for ourselves. So we have going on all the time.
Just to condense this for Forrest. So is there a naturalistic basis for having certain moral preferences and being reasonable?
Yes. Yeah,
I think we're done
is.
Excellent. All right. Sweet.
Yeah, so like when you talk about morality, it's really important to point, and this isn't exactly what you asked, but I think it's relevant. When you talk about naturalistic a view of morality, it's really important to remember that we are not the only animals that have it, and also that it's the same thing as when we talk about intelligence. We are judging it based on like a human framework, and really also a Eurocentric framework, because that's a lot of what kind of contaminates science sometimes. But even with those parameters, even with those limitations, we still see very clear, morality, which I would usually conflate with, or at least associate with empathy out in the animal kingdom. For example, if we, put two black-capped capuchin monkeys, is a really cool study where one of them learned how to open a jar with a rock by cutting through the paper on the top and getting the peanuts out, and the other one didn't. And they put them in a wall, in a little box with a clear wall in the middle, and one of them had the jar with the peanuts in it, and the one who knew how to use the rock had the rock, and the one with the rock passed it through the hole and like helped the other one figure out how to open the jar. And now the other one, with no reason to do so, shared the peanuts with the other monkey that gave him the rock. Exactly 50-50. They were able to count out exactly how much to give. And that's showing like fairness and equality. There, if you put two mice in a cage and you put one of the mice in a much smaller little cramped cage, the other mouse will go and free its little friend from the cramped cage before it does anything else, even at the cost of a food reward, even if it means that it doesn't get what it wants. There's been empathetic studies that show that animals show empathy for each other, showing more empathy the more time they spend around each other. There's been studies showing fairness and equality and morality and counting in a variety of species. Dogs, cats. Dogs tend to not care unless they're on the receiving end of the immorality. If they're in the short end of the stick, then they give a shit. But like, there's compassion, empathy, grief, emotion, all of these things that we can see in several different animal species, and we can absolutely build a naturalistic model of morality this way. It is not unique to humans, and it's not divine or anything like that. Once again, I know that isn't exactly what you asked for, but I hope that kind of broadly covers everything that you were talking about there.
Well, yeah, I fully understand that idea, but what I was getting at is, where does it come from naturalistically?
Oh, your anterior cingulate gyrus and a few other places.
Do you mean, okay, so I'm wondering if you think about this in terms of, if we've got species that have the capacity for empathy and altruism and reason, are those species going to be more or less likely to be able to, survive together and pass on their genes and, keep on cranking out babies than, say, a species that doesn't have those capacities, can't reason and can't work together and just fights and shits on each other all day? Like, which species do you think is going to be more likely to succeed?
You're right. That does make sense. Yeah, the species that cooperates, I guess.
Yep.
And what's really cool is we actually have, like, when we talk about that non-reciprocal altruism, just the complete charity giving of yourself for no benefit to yourself, but it helps everybody out. There's several models of that ecologically that work. And there's lots of old ideas and new ideas that kind of shuffle around. But what's really, really interesting about it is that we see this even in single-celled organisms. There are certain species of bacteria that will actually give their own life to produce toxin to kill other bacteria to make more room for their own species to move in. Obviously, at the individual level, this doesn't work, but on the whole kin selection, quote, quote, kind of thing, where you have now a selfless action that benefits the species selfishly, there is an evolutionary advantage. So, like, as far as where this comes from, it comes from the same way every other kind of biodiversity comes from. It comes from evolution.
Yeah, man.
And it's somehow, well, obviously you just mentioned it was even in single cellular organisms, but it's somehow wiring of the brains working differently. There's something in the brain of a species that makes it feel for another. I don't see that. I'm not sure where that started, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, that there's a few things there that are important. So number one, when you talk about where it started, it would start the same way as anything else. It would either be a mutation, maybe an epigenetic change, whatever. As far as like behavioral evolution in animals, like I can't talk for single cell organisms there, but behavioral evolution in animals, you could cite, like, for example, the Baldwin effect is really cool. It's how behavior becomes genetic over successive generations of basically encoding the ability to learn something so fast that you no longer recognize it as learning. It's just something that's innate and instinctual. There's a lot of models that work with that. Unfortunately, there isn't one that's blanket that you could just say applies to all of them. Studies into altruism are diverse in their methodologies and in their backgrounds, because there's so much there that applies to, well, like I said earlier, our framework of human-focused altruistic behavior. It's kind of weird. So I can't give you a straight answer on that, unfortunately.
Okay. So, I mean, is empathy, I'm thinking that perhaps in a sense that, we see the suffering of another, we somehow feel some suffering ourselves.
Yeah, so that's something that we can see. Like one great example. So there's a few parts of the brain that handle that. Just speaking in humans, my favorite is the anterior cingulate gyrus, which is really freaking dope because you have this part of your brain up here called your somatosensory cortex that actually does the feeling, like the physical sensations. And then your anterior cingulate gyrus is kind of, if you slice down here, it's like one layer back. It processes the same information without the actual stimulus. So it allows you to like feel how you feel about feeling things, if that makes any sense. And so like really cool studies, for example, into empathy that focus on that part of the brain, they show that like if you pinch yourself here and your brain lights up here and your brain lights up here, if you watch someone that you care about, or even just close your eyes and imagine somebody that you care about being pinched here, somatosensory cortex of your brain can't light up. It doesn't have any stimuli. But this front part of your brain, this anterior cingulate gyrus, still does. And so we have here, this is just, again, one example. I'm grossly oversimplifying this. But just one cool example of like a part of your brain that handles what we could call empathetic thinking. And that's a part of the brain that, like we see in a lot of species, it works better and better the more familiar you are with this other individual or other group of individuals, because you see them as part of your family, part of your in-group. And this is where a lot of moral and empathy studies in humans especially go to, is tribalism, tribalistic behavior of, like, are you part of my family, my group, my community, my whatever, or are you over there? And if there's some really, really cool social psychology experiments from the 1970s, I want to say, by Henry Teifel, where they would separate humans into completely separate groups by totally random, arbitrary means that the humans knew were completely arbitrary. And within a few minutes, they would like fiercely defend their little group and go out of their way to fuck over the other group, even though there was no reason. Yeah. And so like look up, if you go to Google Scholar and type in intergroup discrimination, you'll surely find that one. And like the researchers were like shocked by how easy it was to make people
It'll
hate
be like
each other.
blue-eyed people over here, brown-eyed people over there. And it's
that's a huge one. Yeah. Yes. And so
Yeah.
like there's a huge amount of studies into that. And what they show consistently, which is really, this is the big takeaway that everybody who learns about any of this should know, is the most important thing is that you are born with empathy, and you are also born with the ability to be a dick to everybody. And the thing that determines that is just who you consider to be in your in group versus your out group. And you have the power to decide who's in the in and out group anytime you want. There were some really cool studies on empathy that handled around racism. And they found that like people of different races, different ethnic groups had less of an empathetic response neurologically, neurologically, they had less of an empathetic response unless they spent more and more time around that other group. And then they started to see them as humans too, as part of their group. And their brain started to treat those people like people. And then they had a more empathetic response as if they were family members. So literally, if you just decide to start thinking as every human being as your brother, your sister, your family, because they literally are your family, it actually causes real changes in your brains and the way that it works. And it makes you a more moral and more empathetic person. And that's fucking dope, dude. That's wild.
Well, I appreciate that, and that is my personal feeling. Like I said, I find it immoral to this nativist attitude, anti-immigration people. But in a sense, what you're just telling me, because there's the tribalism to it, it almost says that through naturalistic morality, that tribalism is good.
Well, in the sense that it evolved, it's useful because we evolved on the savannas. We evolved out in Africa in little small bands of people. And you can look back at the old, his last name was Service. I don't remember his first name, but the Service model of community structure or civilization structure in humans. And so, the earliest one would be bands, which are egalitarian groups of humans that are only together because they want to be, because they're mostly family driven, or family oriented. And so in that sense of very early humans naked running across the plains hunting for zebras like that, yeah, sure, some tribalism helps because it keeps your food safe. But also it's important to remember that even though that is evolutionarily advantageous in that way, in a big civilization and a big society is not. And the important thing to remember about evolution is that when we talk about fitness, when we talk about being able to survive in one particular environment, when you gain fitness in one environment, you lose fitness in another one. So if I have a big heavy fur coat to survive out in the Antarctic, and then all of a sudden you throw me into the desert, I'm going to die in a stupid, horrible way. But if I slowly lose my fur and start to adapt to the desert over several generations, well, now I'm no longer well adapted for the Antarctic anymore, right? And so as humans, looking back over the past, especially the past 2.5 million years of our evolutionary history, this tribalistic behaviors may have been advantageous at that time, but they become less and less and less so, to the point now where we're in a new environment, we're in a new ecosystem, a new way of living, that this is now a maladaptive thing. And so to lose that, it makes us worse off as traditional humans, but it makes us a lot better off now.
I guess that does kind of go in. That kind of ties into one of my concepts about what's so horrible about the Old Testament. You had the guy who talked about the Exodus story, and I thought, gee, that's a horrible story. I mean, God's a sadist, but Israelites 3,000 years ago, they didn't even think that the Egyptians mattered. They have no souls. Who cares? Kind of because of the high tribalism of the olden days.
If you the whole Old Testament is that. I mean, especially when you get into books like Judges, you get First and Second Samuel. I mean, it is in group versus out group. You got God's favorite people, and it doesn't matter who else they have to slaughter. And I mean, it gets to be a mess. Where now we can look at it in retrospect and go, holy smokes, this is not an example of some sort of moral flourishing here. This is really barbarism on full display here with this in-group out-group thinking. So it's one more thing we have to transcend as a species.
To somehow defend it.
It happens. But we got more of them on the line here, Victor. Thank you very much for the call. Right. We really appreciate it.
All right. Thank you.
Have a great rest of your day.
Have a good day.
Awesome questions, dude. Talk to you later.
Yeah. We're gonna take a break.
Nice guy.
from the wild stuff. Yeah, Victor's chill. Andrew in California had some questions specifically directed to you, Forrest. It looks like about sexuality and gender identity. Andrew,
I
how
saw
are
that
you?
one. Yeah.
I'm doing very, very well. Thanks you guys for taking my call. I'm a big fan of Matt until one day I ran into Forrest. I'm like, God damn, this motherfucker's bright. So.
Let me fool you.
Wait, what does what have to do with? Never mind. Okay, all right. So, what do you want to talk about, bud?
A little background, I have a PhD, but it's in law and not in biology. So my question to Forrest is, I do understand that I'm from Africa, so I know race is a social economic construct. There's nothing like white or black. Over the years, that has happened. However, when it comes to gender, does the same thing apply? Yes or no? And also, I'm an atheist. Also, Forrest, when do you say that this person is a guy or this person is a girl?
You said?
Or transgender? Okay. I have no problem with people who are homosexual. I fight for equality at every level. I don't believe gays, but I struggle a little bit, especially after I listened to you. I think you were with Matt the other day, and you were trying to create a distinction between whether a person is actually a woman or a man. Does that exist or not? Please.
That's a fantastic question, and the way that you phrase it is beautiful. So you're absolutely right. Like, race is a social construct because there are no actual defining factors. It's all completely arbitrary. We kind of just made it up as we go along. The definitions have changed over the course of history and all these things. And indeed, the same thing applies to gender. There is such a thing as sex biologically. A lot of times people talk about chromosomes. A lot of times people talk about external genitalia. A lot of times people talk about hormone levels. These things are actual biological realities that we can measure and we can demonstrate. Those aren't binary either. Like, it's not a one or the other, only this or that. Like, there's a lot of wiggle room. You could say it's bimodal, but like, that's not what we're talking about when we talk about gender. That's not what we're talking about when we talk about sexuality. Gender, sexuality, and sex are completely different things. So with gender, gender is also a social thing. It's a social construct. Gender is defined as an individual's representation and their society's representation, a reflection of what their culture thinks that their biological sex should behave as, or at least their perceived sex, their assigned sex at birth. How am I supposed to behave based on what people think I should do, and how do I feel I should behave for myself as well? That's what gender is. And that varies from culture to culture, from generation to generation, from person to person, sometimes from day to day. And so, for example, when we look at, the way that we structure gender today through most of the world, especially the global north, we have this very binary system of boys and girls. But the truth is, there have been cultures all over the world, all throughout history, that have had more than just two genders, or who haven't had the same defining features of these genders, that they don't have the male roles and the female roles played out the same way that we do. And so you have to start to ask yourself, when you're presented with that, does it make more sense to say that this one way of thinking has steamrolled over the rest of the world, and now that's just dominant and that's what we go with? Or does it make more sense to say that all of these other cultures were just liberals that were trying to change things and come up with their neo pronouns or whatever, right? Doesn't really work that way. And so the simple fact is, like I said a second ago, and I can't stress this enough, sex and gender and sexuality are completely disjointed from each other. They're completely different things. A lot of the times they all fall in one line together, and that's awesome. But a lot of the times they don't as well. They're different things. Not a single one of them is binary. And as far as when I decide when somebody is a guy or a girl or trans or whatever, it's when they tell me. I don't presume to tell anybody what they are because I don't know them. I'm a guy and I'm as straight as I need to be. And that's all I care about. And if anybody else comes to me and tells me, hey, I'm trans, I'm gay, I'm a woman, I'm a whatever, that's fine with me. It matters to me not at all. And it's more important for me to validate them and make sure that they know that they're loved and accepted than it is for me to try to, cram them into a little box, which is what a lot of people like to think that science is for when it's not.
Yeah.
Does that answer your question?
Very well. Thank you very much. It does. It does more than I expected. So thank you so very much. But very quickly, though, I'm not trying to ask a second question, but please let me run the risk of doing that. Why do you guys actually, and you did that a lot today. I know Matt had a problem with this when someone said something similar to what I'm about to say. For instance, I think, Forrest, you did with the caller before the last something that I thought you could have done 3 minutes into the call, not after you guys hung up on him. You can tell right away that this person, there's cognitive dissonance. He does. It's amazing if a person can say some of the things that these Bible believers say, and they believe this shit. So if you try to tell them what you're saying does not make sense, and he keeps saying the same thing, and then you, Forrest, are trying to say, no, look at it this way. He keeps saying the thing that is obviously ridiculous, that slavery. Just answer the question, yes or no. And they try to pontificate and try to equivocate. You just know something is not right with this. I'm not Bill Maher who thinks that religious people are fools and there's something that is wrong with their brain. But I think when folks like you guys, 3 minutes into the call, when they refuse to answer certain questions, you already know. My older sister told me she was okay for a 70, 80-year-old man to get married to her 19-year-old daughter because it was okay in the Bible. I'm like, you got to be kidding me. If your 17-year-old daughter brings a 90-year-old man or a 90-year-old man rapes your daughter, it's okay because it happened in the Bible. She's like, yeah, I'm fine with it, And I was like,
that's so unfortunate.
Unbelievable.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think when guys like that, you guys should hang up on them very quickly and, and what you said eventually after you guys hung up on him was it.
Yeah, I think that there's sometimes when you have to decide I'm not going to get through to this person. There's no way, like you said, we asked him 15 times and he's going to deny, there's no way I'm going to get through this person.
Yeah.
But there are thousands of people watching and some of them might be on the fence. And if they see how stupid this person looks for a little bit longer, it might convince them. So all I'm going to do, you have to make this choice as a teacher. I can try to bring this person in and show them reason. Or if they've made it clear that's not going to happen, I'm going to push them away farther because there's no way it's going to change anything, and everybody else is going to benefit from it. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and that's the thing, Andrew.
You're absolutely right.
So I like to bring up in these instances. So when I very first started watching this show and listening to this show as a podcast, I was an evangelical Christian. I was a young Earth creationist. I was approaching this as one of those people sitting back and just sort of fascinated watching and thinking about, well, do I have good reasons for believing the things that I believe? And the process of listening to callers using the same arguments that I would use to try to defend my faith, just get, frankly, obliterated in real time was very, very good for me. So there's sort of two conversations happening simultaneously at all times on this show. There's the conversation with the caller and then sort of the larger conversation with the audience. So just as Forrest said, sometimes just engaging in the process, trying to have better conversations, even where it's not always possible, is useful, even if not immediately apparently useful.
Yeah. Thank you guys very much. Forrest,
have a great rest of your day.
Appreciate it.
Yeah. Take it easy.
You're awesome. Thanks so much.
All right. We got two. We're going to try to rapid fire these through because we're going over time. So we've got Nate in California with a theory about the Virgin Mary possibly being a Komodo dragon. Nate, what's going on?
Hey guys. Thanks for taking me on the call. So I'll be brief. I know that you probably have very little time left on this one, but the idea was that if Jesus Christ was born of a virgin, now we know that in the animal kingdom there are several instances of asexual reproduction, right? We know that. And Forrest and all of us, you will resonate with this, obviously. You got Komodo dragons, you got pythons, you got great whites, you got known to reproduce. And let us say Mother Mary, according to the story in the Bible, happens to be the only documented case of asexual reproduction in human beings, right? I'm not saying likely, unlikely. I'm saying possible, impossible. Let us say possibly she was then. Then what that means is then that Jesus should have been an exact replica of Mother Mary. He should have been female, isn't it? And so you got it all wrong for this 2,000 years. Even worse, or maybe Mother Mary had a beard, for all you know. So it's got to be one of these two, isn't it? Biologically, technically speaking.
There's a little bit of wiggle there, because there is actually, like you said, parthenogenesis, asexual reproduction in animals. It is possible. My favorite example is whiptail lizards, because they still demonstrate mating behaviors, even though they're all females, and it's really fucking cool. So I'm cursing a lot. I got real excited earlier on. But what's interesting is that even in asexually reproducing populations of animals, you still do have variation. There's still mutation. There's still copy errors. There's still things like evolution still takes place. So it doesn't necessarily mean that Jesus would have been an exact copy of Mary. However, it does mean that there's no way that he could have had a Y chromosome, which means at best case, Jesus would have been transgender. And I hope that all the hateful Christians watching this are anti-LGBT remember that. Jesus is trans. It's the only way it makes sense.
Yes. No, and it's really when I was thinking of this, it was not a laughing matter for me, because I thought about it seriously and said, if I give the benefit of the doubt to all these stories in the Bible, then Jesus cannot be Jesus. It cannot be a full-on dude, right? You've got to have a large amount of attributes that are like his parent, his mother. Right. So that's what I was thinking. And so I just wanting to ratify this with you folks, especially you, Forrest, knowing that you read biology from what I understand. So just trying to
parthenogenesis has never been seen in humans or in any mammal that I know of off the top of my head, but it is possible. It isn't always a perfect clone. But yeah, no, you're absolutely right with everything else you're saying.
Yeah, it's what we'd refer to as a plot hole. Yeah, okay. I was laughing because I can just picture all the I can picture all the Christians listening, especially the evangelicals, that are just like, Jesus was a boy, and like freaking out.
My favorite thing to ask about, I love asking about like Jesus's sexuality. Like, was Jesus attracted to women or what? Because like if you throw out like Jesus was gay, people get really mad. But like, okay, so then was he attracted to women? Was he ever aroused? Was he ever horny? Did he ever get, morning wood? What was going on? And if they say none of that, so, it's not, of course not. Okay, well, so then Jesus, was he asexual? Because that puts him in the A of the LGBTQIA, right? So he's still flying a rainbow flag no matter what. Like there's some way or another, like Jesus is not your friend if you're a super heteronormative person.
We can mark that, by the way, for the producers for next week's poll question. Did Jesus get morning wood? Nate, thanks for stopping by. I appreciate the conversation very much, man.
Good question, Nate. Thanks so much for asking.
All right.
Good day.
Thank you. All right. This is it. This is the grand finale, folks.
The last
We've
one.
got Rami, possibly.
I was thinking Rami, yeah.
In Hawaii, perhaps. He, him, everything in the universe has a cause. Wouldn't that
anything?
Yeah, I don't play. I can't pronounce shit. Everything in the universe has a cause. Wouldn't that imply a creator?
Yep. Yeah.
First, tell us how you spell how you pronounce your name, and then ask your question.
Yeah.
Okay. Sorry about that. It's Rami.
You're good.
Rami.
That's how you pronounce it.
Butchering that the whole time.
All right, Rami. It is.
Oh, it's okay. It's all good. I have had teachers in the past that say Rami. I have no problem with that. So
I'm sure
it's all good.
Yeah. So what exactly is the question?
The main question is, if everything in our universe has a cause and effect, wouldn't that imply that something perhaps if there is an outside of the universe, would have put that into effect, the universe itself?
So this is a very common question, and it's one that sounds really good, but it actually doesn't make a lot of sense when you think about it. So remember, when we talk about the beginning of the universe, we talk about the Big Bang, which is a terrible name for a very cool thing. When we talk about this, we're talking about the beginning of all space and also time. So you're asking what happened before there was such a thing as before. That doesn't really work. You're also talking about the universe, which is everything. What is outside of everywhere? It's the same question as when people ask, what is the universe expanding into if it's expanding? The question sounds right, but it actually doesn't make any sense. It's hard to know if you're even allowed to ask it when you think about it. You know what I mean? So yeah, now we can say everything has a cause, has an effect, or everything that has an effect has a cause. We can say that today, sure. But like when we're talking about the beginning of time itself, that question doesn't really stick and it kind of feels weird. It's not to say there isn't an answer. It's just to say that nobody knows what it is or if the question even works.
Another way of thinking about this,
Well,
that we might want to kick around just briefly, is if we think of like reality as the set of everything that exists, right? And that within reality, we observe that effects have causes. The question would be, how do we determine if reality itself is an effect?
That's a good question. That's a great way of putting that. Yeah, exactly.
And I'm only asking this question. I'm actually atheist, so I'm only asking this question because I watched an interview with Ali Dawah, and it says Muslim destroys atheist. And
sweet
title, always titled that way, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah, he said if everything needs a cause, right? He said, well, everything needs a cause, so there must be a self-sufficient, necessary being that is separate from creation, right? And I was just like, well, I think I should go on the Atheist Experience and ask these guys because I don't believe that's true at all.
Well, and
unfortunately, like the very common response to that in theistic circles when you're talking about this is, okay, if the universe, if everything has to have a cause, so therefore God caused the universe, that's fine. We'll go with it. What caused God? What's the more advanced thing that made that? And if you get to say God doesn't have to do that, God is the only effect without a cause, then I get to say the universe doesn't need that. The universe is the only effect without a cause, and it means the same thing. Like it's either your special pleading or we're just saying we don't know, you know?
And yeah, and in the way that I form that, like the way that I put it to you, like I do that on purpose to get people to think about one thing, the most important word in all of that. If every effect in reality has a cause, how is the most important word? How do we figure out if reality itself is an effect? And the answer to that, as far as I know, we fucking can't. We can't assess that.
Yeah, we don't know.
Yeah, there are some itches we can't scratch, and if where there is an itch we can't scratch, we don't get to make up something supernatural to scratch it for us.
Yeah,
absolutely. I want to keep this brief. I know you have other guests. I don't want to disrespect anybody's time. How do you feel about Spinoza's God? His idea.
Refresh my memory. I don't know.
I mean, yeah, this idea of sort of God being everything or being synonymous with everything.
Oh, what's the fucking point? Is my answer to that.
Everything is everything. It's like when people tell me like God is love. Well, love is love. Why are we anthropomorphizing this for no reason? You know?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's really no reason to do that, and like it seems like you're just making a desperate attempt to force the word God into whatever you believe at any cost. Like there's no reason for that.
Right.
And
yeah, I think he did it because he was. Sorry.
No, go ahead.
I think he did it because he was in a time where religion was being forced, and if he didn't use the term God, he would have probably been seen as an atheist, and then it might have done away with him.
I think some people still did look at him as an atheist, you know. But yeah, I think that when and the way that Spinoza's God is usually invoked in a modern sense, it's just to refer to, oh, there's a bunch of stuff about reality that we don't really understand. There's so where there's this gap in our knowledge or gap in our understanding, we'll just slap the word God on it, and then we can act like we know something about it, and that's a problem. It's a way of people having an answer where what they should be looking for is an explanation.
Right. And this is what I read about pantheism, which I kind of liked a lot about it. If you don't mind me reading a few points. Yeah, it says, reverence, awe, wonder, and a feeling of belonging to nature and the wider universe. Respect and active care for the rights of all humans and other living beings. Celebration of our lives in our bodies on this beautiful earth as a joy and a privilege. Strong naturalism without belief in supernatural realms, afterlives, beings, or forces. Respect for reason, evidence, and the scientific method as our best ways of understanding nature and the universe. And promotion of religious tolerance, freedom of religion, and complete separation of state and religion. And that's
you said these are the tenets of what?
For pantheism.
Pantheism. Okay, yeah. I just want to make sure.
Some of this stuff, I'd say even most of that stuff sounds freaking cool. It's like I'd be going, sweet, awesome. Sounds like someone I would want to hang out with. But then I'd be going, but why this word God has so many connotations and so much baggage? Like why bring that word into the equation? You know, we can have reverence for nature and do all this other stuff as humanists and not need to appeal to anything. You know, I mean, I understand that naturalism was in what you talked about, but like, I wonder what the usefulness is of bringing the God talk into it.
That's pretty much what I was going to say. Like that all sounds like exactly like humanism and Satanism and like so many other things, or the Satan, like these all sound like phenomenal tenets. Why add the extra? Like that's the same thing as when people ask me, like, you know, can you be religious and also be a scientist? Like, of course you can, but like, why would you use a different kind of thinking for this one thing than you do for everything else? What's the reason for that? You know?
Yeah. Rami, you brought some good stuff to the table here, man. I appreciate it.
Oh, thank you. I just, one last thing. I think people use God as kind of like a term to kind of represent like power or something that we can't really understand.
Yeah.
You know,
it happens all the time. It's like when Einstein was talking about how he didn't like quantum mechanics because God doesn't play dice. He didn't literally mean that there's some old man with a beard shaking dice around. He meant the universe doesn't go by chance, which kind of turns out it does a lot. But like like that was the. So that you're absolutely right. Lots of people use that poetically, oftentimes to their detriment.
Yeah,
and also,
I know there are a lot of people out there who regret, you know, the whole labeling of the God particle because it's allowed a lot of disingenuous actors to be like, they've proven God, and everyone's going, like, what? No.
I just had to do a video about people are talking about mitochondrial Eve and Y chromosomal Adam. Like that's not what that means, dude.
Yeah.
Oh man.
Ronnie, we're out of time. I got to cut you loose, but thank you.
The guy that said slavery is okay. Complete idiot.
Well, agreed. I'd like to think there's hope for him yet. He just needs to do some thinking. But again, thank you, Rami. I appreciate it. Forrest, this has been an eventful episode.
It's been fantastic. There's an emotional roller coaster, dude. I went from the depths of disgust all the way up into excited about teaching science. It was amazing.
I love watching you light up when you get to talk about science. And I just respect the shit out of all the science educators out there. I love what you do. Thank you for being here today to everybody watching, everybody listening. Visit our website. Oh, well, come on. Visit our website, atheist-community. My gosh, I've completely lost my train of thought. Atheist-community.org for the latest on what's been happening. Feel free to reach out to us at atheist-community.org. Can we get the crew up here? Because none of this would be happening without our incredible
look at them
crew. We are, if I've said it once, I've said it 1,000 times. We're fortunate at the ACA to have such an incredible group of people here that we get to hang out with.
Puts in the most work.
Well, yeah, the
He's
cat
so
is
tired
our
for making the show run. See that?
Is our overlord for sure. Yeah, but we'll see everybody next time. Thank you for hanging out with us. And slavery is not cool. Jesus
Have
Christ!
an awesome rest of your day, unless you're a fascist.
Yeah,
and
exactly.
then have a bad day.
Have the day you deserve. Take it easy.
Absolutely.
What will it take for you to start opening your eyes, to start questioning the bullshit everyone around you buys? You think it's any of your business what goes on between my thighs? I wonder when we'll be rid of your lies.
It's time to get sexy, so watch Secular Sexuality Live Thursdays at 7 p.m. Central. Visit tiny.cc/YTSS and call into the show at 512-991-9242 or connect to the show online at tiny.cc/callsex.